Always excited to have our next guest here with us on the Oakland County Megacast, because I will tell you, I want to say yesterday I was watching CBS Sunday Morning. That makes me old because I know it's a certain demographic, but I've come to love that show. And they were having a fascinating segment on the show about the 1876 presidential election between Hayes and Tilden. So you think the one we're going through right now is contentious? Not the first one, because I was watching that. And Dave Dulio, I have to tell you, if I had your number, I would have been calling you saying, are you watching this episode right now?
Too funny. I did not see it, but yeah, we often get distracted, I think, by the rhetoric, not from the candidates, but from the analysts and the observers, right, who always seem to tell us this election is the most negative in history or the most contentious in history. And it's not at all. If we go back to the 1860s and look at some of the things that were said about Abraham Lincoln, right, it makes the stuff that's said today pale in comparison.
Right. So with us here on the Oakland County Megacast, Dave Dulio. He is the professor of political science and the director of the Center for Civic Engagement over there at Oakland University. When I watched that segment, it really kind of put a new perspective in what we were going through right now. And this is politics. It really is politics. And 8 days left.
Yep.
We just have to survive it, right?
Right. just over a week to go. We can make it. You know, I would normally say that, boy, that's going to be the end of it. But with the way things are going now, we don't know that for sure. We might be talking here in a couple weeks and still not know who won.
Yeah, I mean, that was the case with the Hayes-Tilden election. It was, weeks before they even declared who the winner was going to be. And then that's how the compromise of 1877 kind of grew out of the whole basic compromise. They said, okay, we're going to let you be president, but this is what's going to happen. And so it was an interesting and fascinating piece. It just kind of puts everything in perspective. You know, I saw something on Facebook. I want to bring up this thought with you because you are the political expert. Ryan Berman is up for re-election here in our district for the state house. And he had put out a post about some of the negative ads that were just outright lies. And one of the things they were saying is, like, if it was outside of politics, it would qualify for defamation and a libel. But yet, since things are said during a political campaign or the political season, it's accepted as politics. Is there any recourse for some of these candidates when the other side is making these negative ads that simply aren't true?
Well, that's right. It's folks who are engaged in an election or engaged in political speech often get a much longer leash, maybe as a way to think about it, than in other situations. And I'm certainly no attorney, and so I don't know where that line really is. But if there was recourse, somebody would have tried it by now, and we would have heard about those kinds of cases being developed. But you know, I guess I would say to your listeners and viewers that, you know, when you see an ad that is quote unquote attack piece, right, or a hit piece or a negative ad, look for evidence. Look for citations. And if there is a claim that is made that is unsubstantiated, it may be made up. It's in fact, it's likely that it's made up, or more likely that it's made up. But if it's got some evidence to it, if it's got a citation to it, look it up and check, right? I mean, because a lot of times what we see are shreds of truth that are maybe taken out of context, or that are exaggerated. That's the word I'm looking for. Exaggerated in a mail piece or an email or on a television commercial, right? So look for that evidence and do some follow up on it.
Yeah, I think one of the good things about the area or the era that we live right now is technology is available to all of us. It's not like 1876. You can go on the internet and Google and try to pull up their voting record for our elected politicians. You can go online. It takes a little bit of work on your side to do the homework. And if anything comes out of this, my guess is people are pretty decided on who they are voting for president at this point in time. But there could be a lot of undecided voters out there when it comes to our local elections and our state elections, especially when you get down to your city council, your board of education, people of that nature in election, candidates on the lower level. So now is really the time, if you haven't already voted, now is the time to do that homework, and you can do it online.
That's a great point, and I would say a few things about that. One is that yes, we are blessed to have all of this information that is accessible to us, but we're also cursed by that same information, right? I mean, there's always a concern about finding good quality information, right? And I would say in addition that those down ballot races, the ones for city council, school board, county commission, right? Those are arguably more important than the ones at the top of the ticket, simply because those local offices are the ones that are going to have an impact on our daily lives much more tangibly, right? And lastly, I would say too that for those local candidates, state house, school board, county commission, as we mentioned, it's often really hard for them to break through the clutter in a presidential year when all of the oxygen seems to be sucked up by Trump Biden or Peters James, right? And there's little room for those local level offices to communicate with voters. They sort of get lost in the shuffle.
Added to that, we're in the middle of a pandemic where they can't do normal campaigning of getting out, knocking on doors, shaking hands, kissing babies. How much of that do you think is going to impact the outcome of some of these elections? Because my guess, a lot of people are going to be voting straight party ticket.
Well, that'll be an interesting thing to watch, and when we see the results and to find out if there's been some significant increase in the number of voters who do use that straight party ticket option. I think that the pandemic has certainly had an impact on candidates and campaigns. I think for sure down the ballot in those local races, and I think the impact is felt probably more so by challengers than by incumbents, right? The incumbents are those folks that are in office and they're looking to get reelected, and they have advantages over their challenger opponents in two major ways. And not always, but in a lot of times, those incumbents have an advantage in name recognition. In other words, people know their name, they know who they are, they can at least recognize their name, and two, in funding, right? So you mentioned that during the pandemic, candidates maybe are less able to go door to door like they normally would have. Well, that really cuts down on their ability to make inroads with voters, communicate with voters, give voters a reason to vote for them over the incumbent, right? So that's where the name recognition plays in. And if incumbents have more name recognition than their challenger, the challengers don't have an opportunity to build that by going door to door. And if they don't have a big war chest, enough money to campaign non-door to door, they're just at another disadvantage over those incumbents.
Dave Dulio with us. He is the professor of political science and the director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University, joining us on the Oakland County Megacast. And Dave, with the mail-in voting and with the mail-in or absentee voting that is going on across Michigan and throughout the country, we're expecting more delayed results this year, even though there's going to be still significant voting at the polls as well. So on election night, the typical election night, which this certainly won't be this year, for those that will be watching the coverage or listening to the coverage or or looking for those results, what do you suggest that they do on that night? Because there's going to be more mudslinging this year probably than we've seen in the last several elections, as this information slowly but surely trickles in, and everybody on the ballot voting, whatever the case may be, gets a little more nervous about those that they support. What do you suggest for those of us that will be tuning in and will be watching this election unfold, as we always do, to navigate that in this particular election?
I'd say patience is of the utmost importance, right? And I think there was concern in Michigan over the maybe some delayed counting that might occur in the August 4th primary. And we didn't see it. The clerks across the state did a tremendous job and got all the absentees counted. Now, what's happening, or what's going to happen, and what's going to have to be counted next week is significantly higher than what was cast in terms of absentee ballots on August 4th. So it's going to take longer. We don't know if the clerks will be able to get them counted, and I think it's really important to focus on those high population areas like Wayne County, Oakland County, Macomb County, Kent County, right? The places where a lot of people live are going to be the toughest to count, just because there's more votes to count. So I think if we see, say, Oakland County start to have most of its vote counted, maybe we know sooner than we think. But I think the chances are in those high population areas that it won't all be counted on election night. So maybe folks just go to bed and wake up and on the 4th and see where we're at.
Just a couple more minutes with you here on the Oakland County MegaCast. My phone has been blowing up with text messages encouraging me to vote. Who is behind these text messages? But not only that, all of the commercials that we're seeing right now telling us to get out to vote, to try to educate and inform us on how to vote. Why are we seeing more of that this election than previously? And who is behind it? Because that's some big money.
Well, it depends, right? I mean, sometimes it's the candidates, sometimes it's organizations, right, who tell us that they are nonpartisan, and maybe this is just the cynic in me, but a lot of times those nonpartisan groups really aren't. There are a lot of folks have agendas, and chances are they're trying to drive turnout among a particular segment of the population, right, that they think is going to advantage their favored candidate. So when we see certain organizations out there that are telling us, boy, get out and vote, make sure you get out and vote, think about who is being targeted with that message and try to see if there's maybe an agenda underlying that message.
I was totally thinking of you when I saw the commercial for the judges for the Michigan Supreme Court, and they said nonpartisan, and they were making that a big part of that commercial. As you reminded us the last time I think we spoke, is that they may be nonpartisan on the ballot, but there is a party that is nominating and pushing for them to get on the ballot.
Absolutely, and the way we choose judges in Michigan is odd in terms of comparison across the country, right? We do things a little differently here, and part of that is the fact that to get on the ballot, or for certain candidates to get on the ballot, they're nominated by a political party. There are 2 candidates for Michigan Supreme Court that were nominated by the Democratic Party, and 2 that were nominated by the Republican Party, and they're almost running as a slate when they don't have to be.
30 seconds left. The last presidential debate. Any thoughts?
More traditional, more typical of what we usually see, and maybe we could say it was a breath of fresh air compared to the first one.
I will say I was watching Fox 2 yesterday, their pre-game Lion show, and they were, some haircut place, and one of the best costumes I've seen so far already before Halloween, a guy getting his haircut dressed as Pence with a fly on his head.
That's funny. That's a good one. I like it.
It was a great one. We could talk to you forever. We'll check in with you following the election. Dave Dulio with us here on the Oakland County Megacast. Always informative. We appreciate your insight and your expertise as always. He is the professor of political science and the director of the Center for Civic Engagement over at Oakland University. I do encourage you to check out their Facebook page, Center for Civic Engagement, because they have some great talks on their Facebook page of some recent events that they've held. Always informative.